This is The Healthy Healer, where true voice is your medicine. This is where we help doctors and other healers navigate through the challenging times by learning from the best minds in the healing industry. Laugh, cry, and be surprised. It's entertainment, education, and inspiration so you can continue to be the unique and amazing healer you were destined to be. Welcome to humanity. Welcome to The Healthy Healer with Dr. Fred.
Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Fred, and welcome to another amazing episode of The Healthy Healer. And today we have ourselves another healthy healer, and this time from north of the border. We have an opportunity to interview Monique Hoving. And Monique is someone who is from Canada and hangs out actually in the Vancouver Island area and is really up to doing great things with respect to helping people heal in ways that maybe they didn't even know they could. And using a lot of her own passion, her own history, and her own education and experience to deliver a fairly unique approach to what healing actually is about and how do we really get people to heal. So Monique has really been up to great things for a while, and we're about to hear a little more about that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Monique Hoving. Monique, thank you so much for being on The Healthy Healer.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the invite. And just as a very short clarification, I'm originally from the Netherlands, hence my accent.
Okay.
And so not Canadian, but love being part of the Canadian country and living there. And so, yeah, just to clarify where my strange
It's
accent
funny.
comes from.
Sometimes, a little bit of your mannerisms or the dialect that you use, it almost sounds Minnesota-esque, right? So in the Minnesota, you got A, which is of course something associated with Canadian north of Minnesota and in the Midwest Canadian area. So I could be wrong about that, but I hear you in your accent. I hear a little bit. I might even mistake as being Canadian, like in the northern Minnesota area. Is there?
Yeah. Yeah, oh, that's funny. Yeah, I just have to clarify that. And I lived in Australia for 11 years as well. So my accent is all over the place.
Okay, I got it. It's great to have you from wherever you're
Thank
from
you.
initially. It's great to have you with me today and here in California, actually visiting today. So on a mission. Maybe we can hear a little bit about that. Monique, before we get started, or as we get started, you might have listened to me having other interviews with people. And I have this 9-letter word, this grammatically correct first question for most of my guests. I like to run that by you. Sometimes it's destabilizing, but mostly really a great way to open up the door and learn a little bit more about what direction to go in. So
Sure.
Monique Hoving, who are you?
Who am I? I am a open, spontaneous, creative therapist and person who honestly loves life. One of the things I really care about is to live life to the full and experience a quality of life to as much as we can create that for ourselves. And so I'm a trauma therapist. I'm a qualified marriage and family therapist by profession. And it's one of the agendas that I often uphold is to help clients really experience the quality of life that they long for. And so that's like my passion in life is to help myself get there, help myself have the quality of life to as much as we can experience that and help others get there. So honestly, that's like my life philosophy that kind of transcends from my personal life to my work life.
So you create a space for your customers or for your clients to experience the quality of life that they long for, that they maybe sometimes I imagine that they don't even know that they long for that kind of life. Like you almost have to first discover that life and then provide a space for them to walk into that. Is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. And with what I've developed, people actually are not aware of what lies underneath the surface. And when they start engaging in the approach that I've developed, they start to discover the hope that's there. And that to me doesn't actually take long when they actually take the risk of engaging in this modality that I've discovered. That's the one thing that just keeps me going is the hope that it actually creates for people with even the most severe traumas.
So you talk about this modality. I assume that we're talking about the TRIP modality. Is that correct?
We are. We are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Am I saying it right? It's the TRIP
Yep.
modality or the TRIP?
Yeah.
How do you like to call it? And tell us a little bit,
Um,
what is this TRIP about?
yeah. So the TRIP approach or the TRIP modality, it basically is an attachment-based trauma approach that integrates eye brain techniques that give differential access to the nervous system. It uses trauma-informed emotional regulation. It works with internal attachment-based truth work. And I can talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. And the body, somatic processing is extremely important and coming from a place of attachment theory. So there's a lot of different core elements that in part I have gleaned from existing approaches and in part what I've discovered and developed myself that really cares for the integrative human being and the holistic person that we are. And in my effort to combine that, I have literally discovered like crazy experiences in terms of how the brain and the body work that literally until this day leave me absolutely gobsmacked sometimes. That what's possible in terms of survival and healing beyond brokenness. And yeah, that's in a nutshell is literally combining all these elements into an approach that cares so gently for the soul, the brain, the nervous system, and the body in ways that I honestly didn't think was possible. This journey has been fairly organic. It wasn't my intention. I'm still finding myself very surprised at where I am with this. And yeah, so that's just been in a nutshell of what it on a whole kind of looked like.
Okay. And that's very compelling in its own right. And like a lot of our guests on the show, it sounds like you almost tripped over it yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally.
It really came to you over time that you started reading about things or learning about things or attending conferences or attending lectures or watching YouTubes or reading articles or books, or how is it that it became part of your life such that you then mastered it and made it the part of so many other people's?
Yeah. Yeah. Truth be told, it's actually the clients that I work with that have shaped and formed this modality. At the core of it is that, sure, during my master's program, I obviously was trained in systemic approaches, like family therapy approaches, couples approaches. And one of the modalities that I stumbled across works one eye open at a time. And whilst I learned the basics there of the eye brain techniques, I then started to really discover what happens to your body, your nervous system, and your brain when you cover one eye. And I honestly, it still leaves me gobsmacked to understand that upon having experienced either distressing experiences, life events, or even the way that we were raised, how it affects the brain and the body, but how that actually shows up so differently when we cover one eye.
Say a little more about that. What are we supposed to learn about that? And I can that a little bit that I know about eyes is we have a dominant eye and we have a less dominant eye. I know how to put the triangle in front of me and figure out whether I'm left-eyed or right-eyed. And then I'm supposed to be able to make some sort of assumptions that this leads to whatever half of the brain that I tend to have. Am I more left-brained or right-brained? Maybe that is no longer true in what you've discovered.
Right.
But what is it that we're really learning when we're covering one eye? And what is it, maybe the deficiency of the stereoscopy? What is it that we have that one eye allows us to see that both eyes keeps us blind from?
Yeah, just even you describing it like that, it's, for example, when a person says, okay, the part of my life that really impacts me is this particular event. I won't go into details, just a particular event or a particular sensation. And it could be even like a chronic somatic sensation.
What is it? The sensation? What did you call it?
Like just the person choosing the event or the experience that they've had in life. It doesn't have to be a memory. It can literally be a sensation. It can be a somatic sensation. It can be chronic somatic conditions. It can be a specific memory. So once the person actually has chosen what they would like to learn more about, then the minute that the person starts to cover one eye, lots of things happen. Now, one of the things that I've discovered is that the nervous system is differently connected from your left eye to the right eye. I am still trying to find any kind of journals, pictures. I have been looking for 3 years, can't find it. All I can tell you is this clinical evidence of what people actually experience is that once the person actually is focusing on, okay, this is what I'd like to learn more about and process, the minute that the person covers their eye, the nervous system perceives you, the therapist, or the person that might be standing close to them, visually different, physically different, meaning that how close or how far or in which direction that you are sitting or standing actually directly impacts the nervous system with one eye closed. So we don't literally do anything else other than, okay, this is the topic that I'd like to process. And then we cover one eye and instantly it shows how the nervous system responds so differently through the left eye versus the right eye. And this is different for everybody. So it's not standard that the left eye response is this way for everybody and the right eye response is that way. But what literally happens is that the brain, depending on the severity of the experience the person is wanting to process, I might all of a sudden look like somebody who has an asymmetrical face. My face might actually be drooping all the way to all of a sudden I look like somebody of the opposite sex. And as you can imagine, that's pretty frightening sometimes to clients to experience that actually your brain has learned to perceive the world in a certain way that with both eyes open, you're not even aware of it.
Yeah.
So it literally goes at a visual level where people might see you different. But then as I ask them, what are some of the worries or concerns that you experience as you look at me or how you think I feel towards you? All of a sudden they go, oh, I think you're going to be judging me. All of a sudden, all the attachment stuff from the past is being projected into the here and now. And yet when they then switch and cover the other eye, they go, oh, you look like you. Why do you look so different on this side? And so obviously the retina is directly connected to the nervous system. So I think we've got a lot more to learn about that. But it appears that the nervous system instructs both the brain, the eyes, and the body in different ways when you cover the left or the right eye. So that's just the start of T.R.I.P, so to speak. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it, but just to give you a little bit of a sense of what almost instantly happened for people. The minute I said, hey, here's what I'd like to process on, this is what I'd like to learn more about. And they just cover one eye, like we do nothing else. So then you start to learn how the nervous system actually is primed according to the experience that the person has had.
Is it normal that one side is more normal and the other side is more distorted, if you will?
It depends. So the way that I would describe that is it depends on the complexity of the trauma or attachment woundings or life experiences that the person has had. When I work with people with complex trauma, which is where most of the time I work with, then it's typically both eyes that may experience some level of distortion, either visually or physically, or the perceptions change. The less complex the trauma, the more that one eye seems to be more regulated than the other.
A couple of questions come to mind. Number one, we call it distortion because we think that using both eyes is actually a truth. So it's distorted from somehow what normal is that we assume is what happens when we're using both eyes simultaneously.
Yes.
It's a weird word, distortion, compared to
Yeah.
what we got. And
Right.
the other thing I wonder is when you
Mhm.
have a client or a patient who's got a very severe, complicated trauma that they're working on,
Yes.
and
Yep.
then you get that level of maximum distortion, if you will.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yep.
then you come back to that same client on another day that is
Yep.
not having that severe of a problem. Does that level of distortion get reduced in that client, or is it inherent in the brain of that client? In other words, is it
Yes.
associated with the trauma that's being explored, or is the level of traumatic life actually create the level of so-called distortion between the two eyes?
I think to some extent it's both, because what actually happens is that when the client changes the topic, the level of distortions or perceptions of who I am and how they perceive me changes.
Yeah.
However, it's not, how can I explain this? Because of the complexity of trauma and the impact on the brain, and the nervous system is geared towards either protecting at all costs or connecting at all costs. And I'll say more about that. And so once the client actually changes the topic, the brain also remembers differently that experience, which then elicits a different perception of the world and the person in front of them. So I haven't necessarily experienced that all of a sudden the projection and the distortions are gone. It's just as they change the topic, the brain's neurological connection to the memory, to the nervous system, the body's responses at the time informs the eyes differently. And so this is where we have to figure out, is what happens for the brain that creates this, both the psychosomatic perception that actually changes, because it's not just a visual distortion. It's actually the psychosomatic experience of the world and the people in it that actually starts to change.
Yeah.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, it's not simply visual. It's well beyond that. Experiential.
Oh, yeah.
It's a whole thing. It's a whole.
Yes.
It's like, how close are you? What's your presence? What's your mood? How do I
Yeah.
perceive you as an entity, as a soul?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And
Much
the
more than
interesting
what we
sure.
expect. Much more than what we expect. That again, it's very interesting. But what are we using as our benchmark? What does the eye see and not see starts to be really interesting as well, because that's
Yes.
what's happening it is happening simply because we are covering one eye. Does that open up the other eye to see deeper? And that's one of the questions. Does it open up the open eye to see deeper because it doesn't have to actually compromise itself to have to work with the now closed eye?
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess the clinical experience that I've been having is that it appears that if the person has chosen, let's say, a traumatic experience that happened when they were about 6 years old, it's like the lens of that 6-year-old all of a sudden comes to the surface because the person all of a sudden, even though they may not have a diagnosis of a dissociative disorder, their voice changes. Their language changes, their posture changes. And it literally is like the body is acting as if they are in that experience at that time.
Yeah.
Only with one eye. Yet when they then switch to the other side, so I call the eye that actually is directly connected to the experience, the wounded part and the coping part. And
the wounded part is one eye and the coping part is the other?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And what's really interesting is that how we then see that the wounded part that is connected to one eye is often directly connected to the experience as if it's still happening.
Yeah.
It actually doesn't have any updated information that the person has with both eyes open. Just to give you a quick idea. So one of the clients I'm working with has fibromyalgia. And one of the things that we discovered is that as we were processing some of the trauma, is that with her left eye open, she experienced herself as a 5 to 6 year old. And biologically, this person is in her 50s. And we discovered that with the right eye open, she was referencing the death of her parent 30 years ago. Yet when we moved back to the left eye that was connected to that 5-6-year-old, she did not know that parent had passed away.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
And this is what I'm seeing consistently without people having any specific diagnoses, that the brain does compartmentalize these experiences. And it appears that neurologically, there is no neurogenesis that actually happens to the present information when traumatic experiences have happened. So that means that those experiences stay stuck at a nervous system level, at a body level, at a perception level, and they're not connected to the here and now. And so the 3 processes that I've developed actually almost help knit back together the brain and the body and the perceptions, which just gives the person almost like an integrative sense of being on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, oh, sorry, go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, I was wondering if after they're done with this procedure where they've now had an experience of being wounded and being on the coping part, and maybe one from the early infant days and one from, in this case, 20 years later, 30 years ago, et cetera. Is there an overarching experience from the individual that can recall what happened afterwards? Oh yeah, with my left eye, I was 6 years old. With my right eye, I was 22 years old. Is there a memory from over the top when, again, both eyes are working?
No. So this is actually what comes to the surprise of most people, is that they are absolutely shocked to experience that the other side did not have access to that information. And so when they open both eyes, they're like, what was that? What did I just learn about myself? And how is this even possible? It literally shocks people to the core that all of a sudden, these experiences come to the surface that with both eyes open, they have absolutely no awareness of.
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking is, at that moment, when you're discussing after the therapy or after the technique is utilized, can they recall what just happened in the text? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Okay.
And that's basically because there's a lot of steps in the process that kind of create that memory consolidation.
Yeah, memory consolidation. I like that. Yeah.
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 Because the whole purpose is actually to understand how the left eye and the right eye, they're actually not on the same page from a nervous system perspective, but also from an experiential perspective. So what I mean by that is that on the left eye, you might have that part that wants to stay connected at all costs to the attachment figure or figures or expectations of the attachment person from the past, which means that the behavior, the feelings, the thoughts, and the somatic responses are lining up with the wanting to stay connected at all costs. And it's often costing. And so on the other side, we then have the part that wants to stay protected at all costs. And so the behaviors, the thoughts, and the feelings line up with staying protected at all costs. Now, as you can imagine, those are very opposite agendas.
Yeah, they sure can. Yeah.
So then people experience this internal alienation of themselves because the wounded part might be the part that wants to stay connected at all costs. And the coping part goes, that's not great. I'm going to stay protected at all costs. So there's actually an internal battle that, in a way, often re-traumatizes the person on the inside. And how I would want to give you an example of that is the wounded part might actually still be connected to the terror, to the fear, to the intense emotions that were experienced at the time of that event.
Yeah.
Now, in order to survive, we actually cope by shutting down emotions, by shutting down somatic feelings. Why? Because there's nobody that actually is there to care for us, to actually support the experience. So then it becomes really overwhelming for the person to actually manage that and handle that and experience it. So the coping part often uses strategies that they experienced from the outside world, such as dismissing, minimizing, criticizing, in order to actually shoo away the intense emotions. So now you actually have the left eye that is stuck with the absolute intensity of the experience, the coping part that wants to do everything in its power to not feel that because there's no resources to actually process it. So now internally, I experience myself dismissing my own pain, not responding with compassion, but maybe with criticism to the experience that I had. So now you literally have the staying protected and staying connected at all costs, creating internal alienation.
Mm-hmm.
So then people actually can't figure out why they can't heal.
Mm.
The biggest discovery I did, Fred, with this is when I started to learn from my clients about permission. So with both eyes open, you might say to me, okay, Monique, I'm willing to try this and I'm going to give you this experience that I'd like to process. And one of the processes that I engage you in is to ask how each side actually feels about the fact that you want to face this and process it and possibly heal from this. And this is the most interesting piece, is that typically the coping part will say, yeah, let's get on with this. I've been struggling with this for 20 years. Let's get a move on. Let's do this. And it's not aware that it's actually its own coping mechanisms that are making it impossible to heal. So when I then move to the other side and I ask and I reflect, okay, so with both eyes open, this is what you chose to process. How does this side actually feel about healing from this? What typically happens is that part goes, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
And it's terrified, it's scared, and it doesn't want to heal from the presenting concerns that with both eyes open, we thought we wanted to heal from. And this is one of the key pieces that shocks people, particularly with chronic somatic symptoms, the most, because they have literally tried everything. They have seen every professional under the sun. And then they come and do T.R.I.P. And then they hear that there is one eye that actually doesn't want to heal from the symptoms that literally make their life almost impossible on a day-to-day basis.
So there's really three vantage points here. There's the one eye, the other eye, and then the both eyes. And there's actually a discussion that needs to happen. And it sounds like on occasion we don't have unanimity at all.
Oh, absolutely not.
2-to-1 or on particular topics and 2-to-1 on other topics.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really fascinating. I totally love this. And the other question I have is, does that mean that when someone loses one eye for, let's say, through an injury or something like that, you get an entirely new perspective of how their life has gone?
Wow, I wish that was true. However, what I've discovered is that I changed the techniques to suit people that either are partially or fully vision impaired. And normally when you are a sighted person, you use your left hand to cover your left eye. What I discovered is that if you cross over and use your left eye to cover the other side and get them to very gently press the nerves around the eye socket, they get a similar response as sighted people. So I work with two people. One is partially sighted and one has two artificial eyes. And what we discovered was one of my clients who received the diagnosis of obsessive compulsive personality disorder. We discovered, unfortunately, it was only connected to his sighted eye. And the eye that now was blind literally demonstrated none of the symptoms, like
Interesting.
none.
Yeah.
So I've literally figured out a way how to make this work for people that are partially sighted or fully blind,
Yeah. Interesting.
which leaves a lot of questions about the nervous system and the functioning in the brain. Yeah, it means to me that just because one eye or both eyes gets lost, the structure of the brain and how it's organized stays the same.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's just how we can tap into it, just uses some bilateral crossing so that the brain actually understands what it is that we're tapping into.
Interesting. We certainly could go on for a long time here, but we are going to come to a close. So I just want, I
Yeah.
hope that have you gotten to the point where you feel like you have given us a little bit of a serious introduction into the work that you do, and that you've given us a clue as to the findings and the surprises and the extraordinary impact of what it
Yeah.
takes to really have only one eye open.
Oh, absolutely. I think this is a good introduction. I do want to very briefly mention that we are 8 months into our research project. And so that we actually have really hopeful preliminary findings and that we are seeking to submit our first journal article this year.
That'd be
So,
fantastic.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fabulous. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. It's really been amazing and very complicated, and
Mhm.
it's very advanced in what is offered, what happens when you
Yeah.
simply cover one eye. And it makes a lot of sense because we certainly depend on our eyes and our nervous system and our body for nearly
Yeah.
everything. So the idea that
Yeah.
all these go together is not that shocking when you come to think about it, or that it's
Yes.
central to our whole existence.
That in a way that it makes sense. When we start to actually look at it and put these pieces together, it makes sense.
It does make sense. I can get that. It's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks
Thank
for
you,
having me.
Monique. Yeah, thanks for being here. Really great discussion. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed it, as much as we enjoyed it, please make sure to comment down below and feel free to share this and really add likes or anything that you think can move us forward. And Monique, how can people find you?
So they can either reach me via email or my website, relationshipworks with an x-therapy.com.
Okay.
For therapists, if they are seeking to know more about the modality, the website will be launched in 2 weeks. It's triptraumatherapy.com, where they can find out all about being trained in this approach.
Fantastic. I love that. Perfect. All right, Monique, thanks for being here, and thanks for being in California, and thanks for sharing all your findings with us. It's been extraordinary. I wish you the
Thank
very
you.
best, and I look forward to future contacts with you. Thanks again.
Yeah. Thanks, Fred. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Bye for now.